And if you want to go into it.
All right. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Geopolitics and Money. Excited to be with you once again. We have how many days we have left for this promotion?
Just today and tomorrow.
That's it. 2 more days. So you've been seeing our faces every day. So
well, kind of a lot's going on. And today
Indeed.
we are diving into
China and Russia and everything else. They're combined. There's so many moving parts. So we're gonna start. We'll start with China, at least to a degree. Then we'll move into what the U.S. Department of Defense just stated, because it's just so many moving parts. So,
absolutely,
we'll start with that first.
So the Defense Department thing is very interesting because there's kind of a battle right now going on between what Donald Trump is saying happened in terms of the bombing of the nuclear facilities, and then what
the reality is.
Intelligence. I'm not going to posit to know what reality is, but the Defense Department, or the intelligence services, basically put out this report. The White House said, yes, the report exists. We just don't agree with it. So interesting.
Yeah, then we'll start with that and dive into that first. Then we'll continue our conversation. So what did I'm assuming you saw the press conference by the Secretary of Defense.
Yes. Okay. So we have a couple of moving parts, but before we do that, let's jump into our sponsor, because big thank you to our sponsor, because without them, this would not be possible. So thank you to them.
Let's do that. Yeah.
A big thank you to today's show sponsor, Giant Mining Corp. Without our sponsors, this show wouldn't be possible. Copper shortages just went political. Washington's eyeing import tariffs, and the scramble for homegrown supply is on. Prices are brushing $4.85 a pound, while global stockpiles sit at a 15-year lows. Enter Giant Mining Corp, advancing the 9,800-acre Majuba Hill project in mining Red, Nevada. Recent drilling caught a 170-foot zone averaging 0.4% copper, crowned by a 10-foot streak at 4.4%, grades that the majors pay billions for. Independent engineers at RASPC are already modeling the first resource estimates. So Majuba moves while rivals wrestle with the new red tape. Speed wins the super cycle, and they are built for speed. Dig deeper at giantminingcorp.com or on the OTC at BFGFF in the US and BFG in Canada. Remember, there are always risks in investments, and there are no guarantees of any kind.
Oh, sorry guys, I took us off.
Thank you to our sponsor.
Yes. Okay, David, do you want to dive into China first, Russia first, or
either? Or let's talk about the US. Let's talk about the Department of Defense, because that seems to really take precedence, because the information just came out as of yesterday afternoon, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me show. So, I have the actual CNN report. So I do think it's, CNN is traditionally the left-wing media, right? And so the left-wing media is going to be very anti-Trump. So I really want to take all of this sort of in a greater context, because it's not like we trust the legacy media. It's not like we're like, oh yeah, CNN is the absolute best. And no, absolutely not. Both sides take both the right and the left, especially in the mainstream media, take whatever information they can to try and use it against the other side, regardless of whether it's true or not. However, I have heard more or less this same information come out of, for example, oh my gosh, what is his name? So some of the other top voices, Scott Ritter, for example, said something very, very similar to this. So it's coming out of some of the cooler heads and more even-keeled voices. So basically, it's this. Let me share the screen with you guys. Here it is. Okay. So
Wow.
so the US, so this is from CNN. Like I said, guys, take everything with a grain of salt, be skeptical about everything. The US military strikes on 3 of Iran's nuclear facilities last weekend did not destroy the core components of the country's nuclear program and likely only set it back by months, according to an early US intelligence assessment that was described by 4 people briefed on it. The assessment, which has not been previously reported, was produced by the Defense Intelligence Agency, the Pentagon's intelligence arm. Now, remember, the White House says this is a real report. It's just that they don't agree with the report, but they did agree that it was real.
Yeah.
It's based on battle damage assessment conducted by U.S. Central Command. I mean, okay, in the aftermath of the U.S. strikes, one of the sources said, the analysis of the damage to the sites and the impact of the strikes on Iran's nuclear ambition is ongoing. It could change as more intelligence becomes available, but the early findings are at odds with President Donald Trump's repeated claims that the strikes completely and totally obliterated Iran's nuclear enrichment facilities. Secretary of Defense Pete Hegseth also said on Sunday that Iran's nuclear ambitions have been obliterated. I wonder if that's true.
Yeah.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt told CNN in a statement, this alleged assessment is flat out wrong and was classified as top secret. Okay, so they're agreeing that it exists,
Yeah.
but was still leaked to CNN by an anonymous low-level loser in the intelligence community. The leaking of this alleged assessment is a clear attempt to demean President Trump. That is for sure true. That's definitely not wrong. And discredit, okay, this is where, like, if people, just linguistically, guys, if people try and say something like what she's about to say, someone is lying. And discredit the brave fighter pilots who, I mean, of course they're brave fighter pilots. I'm sure that they are extremely brave and wonderful at their jobs. However, that's linguistically curious, who conducted a perfectly executed mission to obliterate Iran's nuclear program. Everyone knows what happens when you drop 14 30,000-pound bombs perfectly on their target's total obliteration.
Yeah. Well, first of all, when they said somebody leaked information, that is a normal practice inside the government. And I tell you this as one who was in Washington and was aware of those kind of leaks. It comes from both parties. Let's just make this clear. Of course, the CNN, knowing how it is, which nobody should even trust any media in the US, Fox or whomever, NBC, ABC, all of them, all the media stuff, there is nothing to learn from. All it is there is to mislead the consumer. So basically, when you hear or read something like this, it's for domestic consumptions to keep the narrative alive. The idea that the US has obliterated the Iran's nuclear program is nonsense, because here is the thing. As of this morning, our time, which was yesterday afternoon, Iran made a decision. It's still going to have, it's pending by the final approval of the Supreme Leader Ali Khamenei, which, as I predicted, and there is on a record, I did mention that, if you see the sign that Iran will cease its cooperation with the IAEA, that means they are going to be speeding up the process for a nuclear bomb per se. So as of today, the cooperation with the IAEA, the International Atomic Energy Agency, which, by the way, cooked up the intelligence in coordination with the US and said that Iran has enriched uranium beyond the level that has been agreed on, which was a lie. IAEA, Grossi, his name is Grossi, the head of the IAEA, is as corrupted as he gets. So that's why I'm saying, guys, pay attention to what you are listening to from different sources. What we provide in you is information to the best of our abilities, as accurate as it gets. And we do this. We've been doing this since we started. We fact check the information. We make sure that it is as accurate as it gets. So do we miss sometimes? Yes, of course. We are just humans like everybody else. But suffice it to say, for the Trump administration to say, well, we obliterated the nuclear program, is flat out lie, because here is the harsh truth. And the truth is, now Israel is almost begging Iran to stop the missile launching. Because like I said earlier, it's not that Iran's going to be launching ICBMs here at the US. They won't do that. They don't have the capabilities for all that. So what they have is the capabilities to target Iran and anything else in the region. Well, Israel is experiencing now that the wrath of the Iranians, because they didn't expect it. For us, Trump didn't realize that he did bite more than he can chew off.
Well, so I have this sort of as a, it's still a question, because David, you're right. We do the absolute best we can, but we're not in those rooms, right? We're not the ones making the decisions, and nobody is informing us on anything, right? And so we're doing the absolute best we can with what we have. But so I'm overall very curious as to what the issue is here. Why did, because we see these intelligence leaks, like you said, all the time. So what was the purpose of leaking this intelligence? Who leaked it and why? Because there's a reason. The plenty of things happen that aren't leaked. Probably most things aren't leaked, but this is such a hot topic, and President Trump has been pushing it so hard that it was like such a success. And, it's been actually interesting. I will say this. I don't think he's handled very much correctly, and I'm not sure that he has here either. But I will say he does seem to be pushing the this is over, guys. This is over. This is over. This is over. Like trying to almost will it into existence, right? Like if he says it enough, then it's going to be over. And so and I assume that it wouldn't actually be over. I assume back channels would continue to sort of work this through. But it's interesting that this is a reason to open this back up. This is a reason to continue this type of conflict. And so I don't know that this intelligence leak was leaked for the good of humanity. So I always look at what could there be a motivation for on the other side. And David, what do you think about, this? And we'll get to Russia and China in a minute, guys, because we only have a few more minutes. So, but this type of intelligence leak, and now it's being absolutely blown everywhere. There seems like there's something else going on here, something that's not quite on the surface. What do you think?
Well, the one on the surface is that they, meaning they, in this case, US and Israel, didn't expect the response from Iran. That is what's at the heart of it. And of course, they miscalculated, thinking they're going to intimidate Iran by dropping the bombs and all that stuff. It's once again, it gives me a clear indication that they, meaning Israel and US in this case, or the policymakers who decided on this, had no clue about the history of the Persian Empire. So when you have intelligence like this that is being cooked up, and this is not the first time, if I am to take you back to 9/11 forward, then
absolutely,
or even before that, go back to 1967 when Israel attacked the USS Liberty, and how the intelligence was cooked up. So it's the norm here in the American administration. That's why no president whatsoever is decent enough. You get one or two. If I am to think about Jimmy Carter, was trying to do the right thing, but he wasn't allowed to anyway. The rest of them are all crooks. That's just the reality we have in the US. That's why who you're gonna vote for? Americans.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, Americans got shocked. Excuse me, I'm coming down with a cold, guys.
I know, that's why we only have a few more minutes, because David is coming
Surprising.
down with a cold. So
Surprising. I don't get cold usually, but
well, a lot of travel will do that.
Yeah.
I mean, it's very
so the idea that the intelligence being cooked up, it's a normal practice, and that put the whole intelligence community and sort of under the microscope. You will expect the intelligence community to do sort of provide an objective assessment. Not anymore, including the three-letter agency. It lost. And speaking of the agency, they just lost about 20 spies in China. They disappeared. Makes you just wonder.
Yeah, disappeared. I wonder where they went.
That's correct. Yeah. So the idea that what Trump is trying to do, they're trying to minimize the damage. And that damage is, we have blown up the Iran nuclear program, no more and all that. No, it's flat out lie. And now that Iran, as I mentioned earlier, suspended the cooperation with the IAEA, and rightly so. I was just wondering when they're going to do that. Because it's exactly what North Korea and Pakistan, Pakistan did. And look, can we now go and threaten North Korea? Can we go and threaten Pakistan?
No, we can't, and we don't.
I don't think so. That's the same thing. Yeah. And it's going to become, because moving forward, if I am to think the next 20 years, Iran will never be at peace.
Absolutely.
That's the way I see it. So we can lure them with the lifting of sanctions, but it's not going to work.
Well, I think it's a little bit too late for the lifting of sanctions.
Exactly.
I mean, right. the appropriate relationships have already been established. So, I mean, my concern here overall is I absolutely do not want war, especially, in the Middle East. Absolutely not. To me, there is really few to no reasons for war in general. And so I'm always erring on the side of, looking at the narrative, because does this narrative continue the conflict? Yeah. Right? Does the report that came out of this intelligence agency, does it prolong the conflict? Does it give a reason to prolong the conflict? Now, it might be true. Yeah. Looking at some of the other analysis and assessments of the site itself, a lot of people are basically saying that it's true that, this really didn't do a whole lot. Yeah. However, I am in support of ending this conflict and allowing cooler heads to really come forward, and diplomacy to really come forward. Yeah. So if this is going to aggravate the situation and turn the spout of violence back on, I am curious as to what the motivations were for this leaked document.
Well, because they wanted to maintain the war machine, like always. Remember the Afghan conflict. How long did it take? The Iraq conflict. How long did it take? Yeah. That's why they don't want it. They don't want it to end soon. Where the difference is with Iran vis-a-vis Libya, Iraq, or Afghanistan, or Somalia for that matter, Iran still has options. And one of them will be, and by the way, I'm going to be talking about this soon, guys. So I'm going to put the link for you in the chat box. And one of the options is the option of shutting down the Strait of Hormuz still on the table? And my answer
That's a great question. Yeah.
So it's because Iran has other avenues. It has other cards to play. They're just not going to show everything. So what the U.S. is trying to do, in coordination with Israel, by the way, this is not just the U.S. There is a coordination going on with Israel, is that they wanted to minimize the offensive of the Iranian missiles. It's because what Iran did inside Israel was not expected. I saw some footage last night of some massive destructions inside Israel. So the fact that Iran's missiles are launching, and I'm not surprised. Back then when I wrote the Iran book and I mentioned, should Iran ever be attacked, mark my word, they're going to shower Tel Aviv with missiles. And of course, I had somebody in the government said, well, you don't want to say this. I was like, hold on a second. It's not classified. It's a public information if you know where to look for and how to read the assessment. Simple as that. Then they allow me to disclose that in an article that I wrote back in 2017. So, and that's my point. So when we hear this cooked up intelligence coming up, don't trust that, guys. Don't buy it, especially for our American viewers. You know how corrupted our government is. When I say government, I'm referring to Washington, not the people. The Washington. There are some good people out there like Thomas Massey. You know, you give Guy credit, but they're gonna silence him one way or another.
Yeah, they really tried hard. They really tried hard.
Yeah. I admire the guy for the courage he's taken, but you need more than one individual. So, but also this reflects our how failed our system is, because we're reaching the end. That's basically what it amounts to. We are reaching the end, and like we always say, when everything fails, what they do, they take you to war.
Absolutely.
So they want to drag this on longer than,
you know, before we get to China, and we'll get to China next, but there was a very interesting thought leader that my husband actually sent me a video of yesterday, and it spoke what I was thinking. And it was basically, he said that the elites built a system that they knew would never last, like they knew wasn't going to be sustainable. Because, you know, we talk about, oh, the system doesn't work that we're in right now. Well, the system works just fine for the people at the top. For the people at the top, it actually works really great. It's for the rest of us that it doesn't work out that great, but that's not who, you know, the rest of us unfortunately are not in charge. I wish we were, but we're not. And so the system, the way that he suggested it was, the system was never designed to be sustainable. It was never meant to be sustainable. It was meant to put enormous amounts of power and enormous amounts of money in the hands of the people at the very top. And so now that it's collapsing, it's not collapsing for the people at the top. It's collapsing for us, for everybody else.
That's true.
And so it was an interesting way to think about that, because, you know, we're not looking at people who accidentally set up the system like this. These people have known that it was on its way down probably from the beginning and set it up this way anyway, because it's working out for them either way. So anyway, I just wanted to put that out there, because we're talking about the fall and the collapse like it's an accident, and maybe it is. But it's not so much of an accident that everyone is equally being impacted by it. It's only a certain portion of the population that's being impacted by it. So, you know, is it on purpose? Is it controlled demolition? Maybe. I'll put that to you guys to make your own decision. China. Let's dive into China and Russia, because they've had some interesting hands in what's gone on.
Well, let's start with Russia first. So when we think about Russia, there's a lot of conversation coming up now as to, did Russia just dropped or abandoned Iran? You know, it's not easy to answer that question, because the reason being, you have to consider the strategic interest of each country. And any country, I don't care what country that is, it has to think about its strategic interest, national strategic interest, that is. So the only difference in this case here, which an average person will be asking, is how come Russia abandoned its friend, its allies, in time of need? That is where the key. So of course the US is going to, there are certain media outlets in the US will add more fuel to the fire regarding this issue. Why? It's because they want to create that what's the word I'm looking for? I drew a blank. I couldn't think of the word.
That's doubt. Okay. It's been a long couple of weeks, David.
Doubt. They want to create doubt by the more they talk about how the Russians abandoned their friends in time of need, the more you start to think, well, can we ever trust the Russians and so forth? Well, you need to understand that the relationship between Russia and Iran is strong, you know, except that Russia is not going to send weapons openly. And if they do, they're going to send it through a third party, one of the examples that I can give you, I won't be surprised that if some type of weapons arrive to Iran, but it might come from some third-party country like North Korea.
Yeah.
Well, believe it or not, that weapon might not be from North Korea, but rather from Russia. It just has been diverted that way, which is a normal practice. We do it. We have done it throughout the decades. We never send the weapons directly. We'll go through a third party. I'll give you a quick example. When we were fighting the Soviet Union in Afghanistan, who do you think was providing those weapons to the Mujahideen? And through whom we were providing the weapons? It was through Saudi Arabia. So that's my point.
Weapons and funding. I mean, I want to bring up that also because both sides.
It was FYI. It was the Saudis that funded the Mujahideen through the petrodollar. It was a conversation between King Fahd at that time and Reagan, and in a closed door session, that's when the deal was made. And through the Prince of Saudi Arabia at that time, Prince Bandar, who was the Saudi ambassador, the longest serving ambassador in Washington, 20 years in that position.
Wow.
And by the way, that guy used to just walk inside the White House without signing the log. He's just walking, doesn't need an appointment. That just gives you an idea right there. So the same arguments I can make now about the Russians, except that the Russians will have to think in terms of the strategic interest. And we should not rule out one possibility. And that possibility is that Mr. Trump reached out to Putin behind closed doors and asked for Russia not to support Iran in return for some favor. And again, I'm just thinking outside the box.
That's not impossible. Yeah. That's not impossible. And especially because, like, we've sort of heard reports of Trump calling this dignitary and that dignitary. Yeah. So Trump's calling around. So it's very possible that that was something that he did, was sort of because he has sort of asked people to calm the situation down a little bit. To his credit, I mean, it's not like he does every single thing wrong, but to his credit, and quite frankly, if he bombed empty nuclear facilities, that might have been to his credit too. Like, I know he's getting like shut down for it, but if it's something that de-escalated a situation that might turn into World War III, I mean, this may not be a popular opinion, but de-escalation first and then diplomacy after that to follow it up. So I don't know how well the diplomacy is going to work, but the de-escalation first.
Yeah, but I respectfully disagree with you on that.
Okay.
And the reason being, because you are forcing me through the gun to negotiate. Why will I even sit down and have negotiations with you to begin with? But that means in this case, the US is not coming on an equal footing. And I don't see any logical head of state will even agree to something like this. I see your point in the idea that let's just do this symbolic bombing of an empty space, then we'll move into the negotiations. But it's not going to work given the mindset of the Iranians or the whole region. They don't see it that way. They think differently than we do. So, and that's one point that I have to sort of just think about it. I thought about that one. Maybe they will do this, but Iranians are not going to see it that way. They're already saying now, forget about negotiations with the Americans. And
well,
rightly
for
so,
sure. But, you know, there's always the stuff that's happening in the front, and there's always the stuff that's happening in the back.
That is true.
Right. And so the stuff that's happening in the front is the stuff that governments have to do and say to
for domestic consumption.
For domestic consumption. Exactly. For domestic consumption. And then, you know, and it does, it gets people all riled up because there is what are the two things you don't talk about at like a family gathering? It's like religion and politics, right? Yeah. Because it gets people all riled up and everyone's all riled up and there's tons of emotion about this stuff. And there really is inside populations. There's tons and tons of emotion about it. Yeah. And rightfully so. I mean, this is scary stuff. And there's a lot of fear about it. But then, so there's the domestic consumption, right? And so every country is telling its own people a different narrative. It's not the same thing. Everyone is telling their people what a great job they did, right? Yeah. If you look at everybody's media, everyone believes that their country is the one that did the best job. Okay, well, so did all of the countries do the best job? Did all of the countries? So there's two things going on. There's the public war, and then there's the private war dash diplomacy. Diplomacy is like a rough word for that because it doesn't always mean that something good happens, but like the conversation that's happening behind the scenes. And so in this, I mean, this case is no different. If you look at every single country, every leader of every country is like, we're doing the best job. We're doing great. Well, okay, so the truth is somewhere in the middle of that, right? So I'm always very curious, and I think that's why it's very possible that you're right, David, that Trump went to Putin and maybe even Xi and said, "Hey, let's calm this thing down. Like, this does not have to go this way."
Yeah, well, actually, the US did reach out to China yesterday. Actually, I am aware of this and I have proof for it. So they are asking for China to really talk to Iran because they know the US won't be able to. I think, and again, I am convinced, as I said earlier, this conflict will be the last nail on a coffin for the US and Israel, for that matter. In other words, the partnership in the Middle East. Middle East will never be the same, or West Asia will never be the same again. Where the key question we ought to ask right now before we leave is this: if Iran decided to move forward in the same path North Korea did or Pakistan, would you see other countries in the region, the likes of Turkey, the likes of Saudi Arabia, and the likes of United Arab Emirates or Qatar, because those they can afford it financially, embark on a nuclear program?
I think that is a fantastic idea, or that's a fantastic question. And it is the question going forward right now.
That's
is,
true.
With this, the way that it happened, what is that part of the world going to look like? And what does it look like for the United States going forward? Was this a really big win, a really big loss? I think your question about is the closing of the Strait of Hormuz still an option is a really big, important question, especially related to China. Do you want to dive into China a little bit?
Well, how about if we talk about it tomorrow? How about if we leave it for tomorrow?
Sounds good.
We'll do China tomorrow, guys.
Yeah,
let me say thank you.
More of China, Russia, and all of this tomorrow, because we are running out of time. And David, I want to make sure you take care of yourself.
Let me say thank you, Rafael. Rafael, as you all know, guys, is an avid supporter of both channels. So, Rafael, we can't thank you enough, man, for your support. So, what we saw in Iran is exactly how World War III will go, and it is not good. Our weapons are obsolete. The S-700 will shut down aviation completely. You got a point there, because here is the thing, and this is just to think out loud. Doesn't strike you odd that a bomber that is coming from out of the airspace of Iran will be able to penetrate the Iranian airspace without them knowing? I mean, just take a step back and think about it. So it's just food for thoughts. So once again, Rafael, much appreciate you. And I've been a member with us for 27 months. So I remember.
Wow.
Yes, I remember Rafael the first time.
Wow.
I remember. So we're so grateful, Rafael, and we want you to know how much we appreciate this and what it means to us. So Army with Harmony, it goes without saying, you too, man. We truly, truly appreciate you and our community. This is not about just specific individuals, for everybody, but it's just those individuals that we give a shout out to. They've been with us, they've been supporting the channel. So it's like you, if you really care about or you enjoy what you are listening here as far as analysis and so forth, so make sure to support the channel and subscribe if you have not done so. We will greatly appreciate it. So, all right, remember to join me in about 30 minutes. Hopefully my voice will still be I'm surprised that I got sick. Usually I don't.
David, you gotta cut yourself some slack. I know what it was like the last, you were making shows, like you had to get back and forth through different countries. It's very normal. So, you got all the supplements, you've got all this stuff to take care of yourself. I'm not worried. But you are unfortunately still human, or fortunately, I don't know.
No, I will go with the latter. All right, guys. Hope to see you tomorrow. We're gonna be doing our last show for the sponsor. That doesn't mean we're not gonna be there, and we're gonna be addressing China. So we got a lot. We're gonna prepare some stuff for you in more detail, and we'll talk about it tomorrow. All right, guys. See you tomorrow. Bye bye.